Hello and welcome to the Moms Who Know podcast. I'm your host, Chanel Nielsen, and I'm joined today by Maria Alcoke. Maria, thank you for being with us.
Chanel, thanks for having me.
And Maria has a special guest on her side. She's got her little one in the room with her. And so if you hear any sweet baby noises, that is where those are coming from. And I was telling her, we're used to that on this show. If you go back and listen to the archives, there are definitely some baby noises from my little guy when we first started the show, because there were moments when that's exactly what we did. We podcasted, when I was nursing the baby or he was in the room or just whatever. As moms, we do what we have to do. So to start off, Maria, I want to just give a quick intro, and then I'd love to hear a little bit more about your podcast. So Maria is the host of the Engine Mom podcast. She is a CrossFitter. She's a certified pre- and postnatal coach, and she runs her own graphic and web design studio. She's a mom of two, so she knows what it's like to be a mom and do all these other things, and she loves fitness and coaching and podcasting. And I've been privileged to be a guest on her podcast, so I'm excited to have her here today. So let's talk a little bit about your podcast. Tell us what the purpose is of your podcast and why you decided to start that.
Thank you for that introduction. So the purpose of the Engine Mom podcast was, I'll go back a little bit to talk about what inspired me originally. I had this sort of situation in motherhood where I found myself really lost in my identity. And I found myself shifting gears. I say that in air quotes, but sort of figuratively shifting gears from one role to the next. And I realized that engine is such a great metaphor for the roles that we play as a mom. And so I thought, what if I could find women, any mom out there who has a story to share about how they do this, how they make this work, how do they go from the mothering at home to in the business or in the office or as a partner, as a sister, as a wife, whatever it might be, and really allowing them to share their stories from I say this again in air quotes, the trenches of motherhood, and using that as a way to feel connected and feel that we're all in the same situation together, that we're experiencing it together. And so that was the original premise, was to share stories to fuel women who are driven and motivated to pursue their passions and find ways to really make it work. And I say it being, all the things that we do as moms.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's such an awesome mission and a really cool thing that you decided to do. Now, I love all the cute little, the things you had in air quotes, right? Shifting gears and Engine Mom. Tell us some more, because as I've looked over your podcast, you have so many fun little things that tie into that. So give us some more.
Yeah, so I got a little carried away with the car theme, so it was, I do a lot of things that relate to driven and fuel, and it is very applicable to us as mothers. So we think about the way that we fuel our bodies with healthy food, or the way that we fuel our minds with, what we call it, continued education or personal growth, like reading or doing things physically active that's fueling our bodies, like going to the gym or going on walks and being in nature. And, driven is a word that can be used in so many different ways. You can be driven to be a better version of yourself in the work world. You can be driven to be the better version of yourself in your relationships, as a parent. So I thought that being able to focus on the metaphor of the engine, and then kind of get this very visual. I'm a visual person. I'm a creative person. So I see the gears literally kind of turning as we talk about all these different moving parts in our lives. And the idea is that if we don't focus on every single one of those moving parts, if one of them kind of falls off to the side, it stalls our engine. And so again, just continuing with that metaphor, we want to be able to move forward. We want to be able to be behind the wheel and be in control of our lives. And so that's where all of those themes and metaphors really play into our roles as mothers.
I love it. So I think those are so fun. And I bet you had fun kind of, making those connections and putting that all together, because it does give us a really good framework for, some things that we want to do in motherhood. And one of the things that we're going to talk about today is this idea of shifting gears in motherhood. So, as you have recently shifted gears in your life, having your second baby. And so let's talk about that transition for you. So, as you went from one child, and how old is your older?
She's
your
3.5
older daughter?
years old.
Okay, 3.5. And then at this recording, a 3-month old at this point. So that's a huge transition to add another baby to the family. But in motherhood, we have all kinds of transitions when kids go to school or when moms go back to work or any of these big things that we are transitioning through. And one of the things that you say has helped you in transitioning is habits and routines. So talk to us about why that's a major thing that you rely on.
Absolutely. Well, as you mentioned, we have these transitions that happen throughout our lives as parents when our children are going to school or whatever it may be. And I find that those transitions, regardless of if they're major or sort of smaller, not as significant, can still throw you off in terms of your feeling out of control or feeling as if you no longer have the comforts of knowing what's going to come next or what to expect. And so with the routines and habits that I have developed during transitions, I try to use them as a way to feel like I do have control and that I feel like that remind myself that those things are only temporary. That if I am going to have to let go of certain things, I know that it's not always going to be this way. Typically, when I think of transitions, the things that I have done personally in my life, we've moved across the country. We've had another baby, we've switched jobs. And so those are the things that I tend to really look for comfort in routine, if that makes sense. So knowing that there's some things that are going to always be the same, that are always going to be in my control. And I like to have those as something to rely on during those unsure or sort of unclear moments in life.
Yeah, that totally makes sense to me. And as a mom of a toddler, I think that starts really young, right? We see this with our young kids that they really thrive on that routine. They like to know what's happening and it makes them feel comfortable, like you said, and it makes them feel in control. And, there's so many things that we're not in control of and so many things that are uncertain in the world. And so for toddlers and for adults, for all of us, it's just like, I have this one thing that I can count on, this thing that I know is going to be kind of an anchor point and keep me grounded and keep me, doing the things that I want to do and kind of keeping me focused. So what are some of the habits and routines that are in your life that do that for you?
And I'll speak to this current season of life, which, as you mentioned, is just getting adjusted to having 2 children. And I'll start by saying one thing that really shocked me about having 2 kids is, for whatever reason, I thought that I could keep every single habit and routine exactly the same and bring a new baby into the mix. It was this foolish, maybe as naive as a second time parent, thinking, okay, I'm going to still be able to go to the gym for an hour a day. I'm still going to be able to get all of my work done. I'm still going to be able to go to the store and get my groceries done. And all of these things that were part of my life that we had, I say this, loosely, but we had figured it out when we had one kid. And all of a sudden we throw a second one into the mix. And there was a lot of having to release my expectations and a lot of mindset work. But so to go back to the original question, the routines that are really working for me right now, like you mentioned, keeping the routine for my child is super important. So my husband and I tend to divide and conquer in the morning. We have very specific things that we do for each other and for my daughter that just encourage, I guess, peace in the house. So, for example, in the mornings, I'm typically nursing the baby. And so my husband will take my daughter downstairs. And for a while, we had this issue where she would want to go upstairs and see the baby and interrupt the nursing session or wake her up or whatever it was. And so we started bringing her clothes downstairs to change her. So we never had to go back upstairs. And I know these are sort of, simple little things that we could have easily overlooked, but we found that being creative in the routines during this time of transition was really important for us. And something else that has really been, again, nothing life-changing, but just made life a little bit easier is meal planning and creating a grocery list at the beginning of the week. Because the last thing that I want to do, and I think my husband wants to do, is come home at the end of a long day and look in the fridge and say, what the heck are we going to eat? And so these are like very, very basic routines, but they have made our lives very, I don't want to say easy because that's not the right word, but they have made them very manageable in this hectic season of life.
Yeah, I don't think easy applies to anything when there's a 3-month-old, but yeah, manageable. Good word. So you mentioned in there mindset work has been part of what has helped you. And, I would love for you to go a little bit deeper into kind of the things that you've done that have helped you with this transition, because I think that that's really key there, is shifting how we think.
100%. And I know that based on my experience with my first, I learned a lot. And I think that that's this natural progression as we become more versed in parenting. We start to understand things about ourselves. So I know that I'm a very type A person. I like to be in control. I like to have answers. And so I had to really be clear to remind myself that I don't need to know every single stage of development that my daughter is going through. I don't need to be, I don't need to be in control of every single thing in this house. I don't need to be able to look around and say, I'm content with how clean the house is. I knew that I had to let go of a lot of my expectations in order for me to show up as my best self as a parent, but also to show up as my best self in other aspects of my life. Because we talk about these shifting gears. I had to be ready to let go of something or kind of turn off one side of my brain, like my desire to be the homemaker and keep the house clean when it was time to work. And so it was I did a lot of journaling. I did a lot of sort of preemptive planning and time blocking and just writing things down. So even just writing something as simple as the morning routine down so that we had a visual that was very explicit for us. Those were some things that helped with my mindset shift, but also allowed me to feel as if I had control in the areas that were somewhat unpredictable, especially with, infant sleep and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, to write that down and keep control of what you can keep control of, and to be very aware of what that is while letting go the rest, and to put it down on paper, because I think that serves as a real check-in point. Like, okay, I can't control this, but here's what my day is going to look like. Are the things that I'm going to stick to, and these are what I'm going to focus on, rather than focus on, the lack of sleep or whatever else is going on. And I feel like it's so hard with a newborn in that postpartum period, which you're still in. I mean, 3-month-old you're still dealing with so much unpredictability and all of that. So how much, as far as routines and habits and these things, you mentioned going to the gym and these other things that you had in place, how much do you keep of what you were doing? And how much do you say, no, I'm going to let this go for now? And how do you find that balance?
Yeah. And I think balance is kind of one of those words that goes in the same bucket as easy in parenting. It's
yeah,
it can be used very, very loosely, right? So as far as keeping routines, I think, and I mentioned this earlier, just having those really specific routines with my oldest daughter because of her age, those were the things we knew for sure were going to stay in place. The meal planning and those type of things were relatively easy to keep those in place because they weren't highly affected by the situation. But the things like something as simple as making the bed, which was something I did every single morning. It made me feel as if that was like, okay, it was a trigger. I made the bed. Now I can go downstairs and start my day because I've decluttered one space, and it's essentially kind of decluttered my mind in a way. So letting go of making the bed. I don't think I've made the bed, Chanel, honestly, in about 3 months. I mean, changed the sheets, sure, but not actually folded, made the bed look nice. Weekly chores that we used to really be diligent.
Even judge you. I wouldn't even judge you if you hadn't changed the sheets in a long time. Moms of newborns don't even have to worry about stuff like that.
Well, I joke because it's like, okay, I probably slept in some baby spit up for like a week, and it's just, it's just going to be that
Sometimes
way.
It takes that long before you're like, okay, time to go do a load of laundry here.
Exactly. Well, that's kind of the next thing I had to kind of let go of is this. We went from doing maybe 1.5 loads of laundry, or, like 2 small loads of laundry a week, to doing like 4 or 5 loads a week. And I used to have laundry days on Wednesdays, and I would have it folded and put away and organized by Thursday afternoon or whatever it was. And it was completely, those things I just had to let go. They had to go out the window. So to this day, it's just that rotation of laundry. I think that's pretty typical in most parents' lives. But the things like even like cleaning the bathroom. So I don't feel that great about it because I definitely am, like I said, type A. I like to have my house look a certain way. I've just had to let go of it. We have a lot of other things going on that are taking precedent over, dusting. One of the other things I had to really let go of, at least in the early stages, I've started to get back into this habit and routine, but I used to sit down and really block out my week as far as my work, because I am kind of playing the stay-at-home working mom role right now. I have a little bit of childcare. I'm coaching at the gym. So I'm really having to be diligent about breaking down the hours that I have to work and serve my clients for my design work. And at the very early stages of postpartum, I was taking some time off, but I had to let go of sitting down on Sunday nights. And I do this. It's a very very specific routine I do. I have my highlighters and my pencils. I do everything like color coded. And that was so therapeutic for me. And it was hard to let go of that, but it was necessary in that big transition. And then the one other thing that I used to do regularly that I haven't done in a while, which I, again, try to find time for it, is meditation. I used to have a morning meditation practice that I don't remember the last time I did it, which is sad. But one day I know that reminding myself that this is temporary.
And that's my next question for you is, so some of these things that really helped your life to flow, like your weekly planning session or your meditation, or these things that are important to you, how do you plan to transition them back in? Now, I understand as a mom of 5, like I get it. 5 babies later, like you have to let things go when you have a baby. The baby comes first. You're busy. And if you try to keep up with all those things, it'll be really hard on you and hard on the baby. And that's not what is needed in the moment. But moving forward, do you have a plan in place for how to kind of transition those back?
That's a great question. And actually, you said more moving forward. It's something that I've actually started thinking about already, just because I got to this point where I realized that I don't have nearly as much time as I used to, and I have to be smarter about it. So I think part of it is being honest with yourself about how much you can take on and what is 100% a non-negotiable and what is something that maybe isn't serving you anymore. I know a lot of times we can be connected or we can hold on to these routines because we feel like this is what I've always done, but we haven't taken the time to sit back and actually check ourselves and say, does this still serve me? So right now, meditation, no, actually, it doesn't serve me. I would much rather spend 20 minutes checking my emails and clearing my email inbox because it helps relieve some anxiety. That probably takes off more anxiety than meditation would in this stage of life. So it's a combination of really getting clear on what do I need? Like what would be nice to bring back into my life if I have room for it. And then what can I actually let go of truly and maybe not do again, or maybe just wait down the line. So another thing that I really have to focus on is lowering expectations. As somebody who really likes to have things done a certain way. I am a high achiever in many parts of my life. I think that's where the driven mama came from. But I really had to think back about, well, how can I still get what I need with the bare minimum? And I know that in some cases, you don't want to just settle for mediocre, but when you're trying to make things happen, you're trying to navigate a lot of change or just try to create better routines and habits, the best thing that I've found is keeping those expectations super low. And I'll use the gym and fitness as an example. I used to be one of those people that was like, okay, I get in, I take my class, I work really hard, I'm there for an hour. I need to get sweaty. I need to have my heart rate super high. Maybe I'm like sitting on the floor for a few minutes afterwards, recovering. Like that was kind of my non-negotiable form of exercise. And now I know that I don't have an hour. I don't even have half an hour sometimes. So I have to just kind of go with and do what I can with the time that I have. And so there have been a lot of times where I know I have maybe 15, 20 minutes. I'll set my timer. I'll grab my kettlebell. I'll just make up some kind of quick workout. I'll get my heart rate up. And that is good enough. And so like kind of done is better than perfect is sort of that mantra there. But it can be applied to all different kinds of habits and routines that you're trying to bring into your life. Meal prep or whatever it might be. Even if it's meditation. My husband has this non-negotiable practice of 20 minutes a day. Twice a day. And I was like, well, listen, I love you and I want you to feel your best, but you might have to cut back on that. It might only be once a day. It might only be 5 minutes, not 20. So really just being able to be, able to shift those expectations and be willing to make some sacrifices within your routine in order to actually still make it happen. And then the other thing that I think is really important to focus on when you're trying to build up routines and habits is not have like 7 non-negotiables for your morning routine, right? So at one point, and I'll use my husband as an example because this is something that we had to have a very serious conversation about, because I was like, I feel like you're getting everything that you need and I'm not getting anything of what I need. So he used to have a routine of the 20 minutes of meditation, 20 minutes of reading, 20 minutes of journaling, sitting in his chair with his coffee. And meanwhile, I feel like I'm scrambling and it was like, he was like, this is a non-negotiable. And I was like, well, listen, like I have non-negotiables too. And I think we both have to sit down and get really, really clear about what it is that we want. And an exercise that we did actually, which was super helpful. And I would totally recommend this to anybody who's trying to recreate or just create for the first time routines, is write down what your ideal day looks like, or ideal morning, for example. You can really break it down into a smaller chunk of time. And I mean, literally from the second you wake up, like how much time are you spending brushing your teeth? How much time are you spending getting dressed? Like really break it down that way. And then look at that ideal and then try to write down to the best of your ability or the best of your knowledge, like what does your actual morning look like? And then compare the two and figure out how you can work in those important pieces. Those, maybe you want to be able to drink your coffee hot. Okay. What can you let go of? So if you can't, sit in the mirror and put makeup on for 15 minutes, but you really want to drink a cup of coffee hot, are you okay with letting one of those fall off of the routine, for the time being until things are a little bit different in your life? So those are the things that I try to, I kind of recommend for other mamas to try, but that was something that I did myself.
Yeah, that's a powerful exercise. I think that would really kind of bring a lot of things to light. I love this conversation of lowering expectations. And I want to just point out, it has a negative connotation, doesn't it? It's like you're lowering your expectations, but at the same time, it's almost like in all reality, you are renegotiating what you're doing. And you're saying my priority at this phase of my life is my baby, or is my move across the country, or is whatever it is. And so it's not that you are, lowering your standards. It's just allowing for other things to rise to the top, allowing for the things that are more important in that moment and recognizing what those most important things are. And for me, one of the areas where I have lowered my expectations is my house is not as clean as it used to be. And when I had 2 kids in this same house, we used to have white carpet. And if people would step on the carpet with, a shoe, when they would leave, I would get on my hands and knees and scrub that spot out. And I can't even fathom. Who was that woman who used to do that? Because now, so different, so night and day. We've dyed the carpet brown and it needs to be brown because that's just how it is. And so anyway, it's not that I have let everything go and lowered I've lowered my standard of cleanliness, but you know what I mean? It's us choosing something else instead. It's a reordering of priorities. And so I really, that's what I heard as you were talking, is like, what do I still need? What needs to stay in there? Even though this sweet little baby that I have, she's the priority. And so everything else needs to kind of fall in place around her.
I completely agree. You said something about, you said, who was this person, right? Who would get down on their knees and clean the carpet. And it made me think of just reflecting on, you could say this for you as a mom of 5, like you are so different now as a mom of 5 than you were as a mom of 1. And this is like, we constantly are reinventing ourselves, or we're constantly evolving into the next phase of life, and we're becoming a different person. And even that requires, yes, I liked sort of what you were saying, not so much lowering our standards, but we're shifting our expectations, and we're allowing ourselves to embrace different priorities because we no longer need to hold on to some of those things. I think a lot of times we want to keep those shreds of ourselves that we're like, oh, I don't want to lose myself in motherhood. But I think it goes back to the whole premise of Engine Mom. It's that we're not losing ourselves. We're rediscovering ourselves. And that's the best part about motherhood, is you become essentially a new person. You're like birthed again when you birth a baby. I've heard that before.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I think this has been such a fun conversation, and I feel like I never knew how many words in in a regular conversation have to do with engines. And I think I've been hyper attuned to it in this conversation, but there have just been so many. It cracks me up. So Engine Mom is a perfect name for your podcast. You guys can go and find her at the Engine Mom podcast. Any other places that you want to highlight for us?
Yeah, you can check out my website is enginemom.com. And I'm pretty active on Instagram. That's my favorite social media platform these days. And it's just at @the_engine_mom.
Okay, we will link to that. And thank you so much for being with us today, and for teaching us, and for really letting us have a peek into your life as you go through this transition into 2 kids. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And thank you, everyone, for listening to Moms Who Know. Maria had so much good stuff to share, and I hope that you learned and have a lot of takeaways from this episode. One of the things that she talked about that I really liked was the idea about we aren't losing ourselves in motherhood, we're discovering ourselves. So the podcast question of the week is this: what have you discovered about yourself in motherhood? I'd love to hear your answer. Visit me on Instagram or Facebook at Moms Who Know Podcast and let me know. And we'll see you next week on Moms Who Know.